Marie de' Medici was a woman who had waited a very long time for her crown. Imagine arriving in France as a wealthy Italian princess, married to the king, Henry IV, but never quite feeling secure. For 10 long years she had been Queen of France in name only. She had given the kingdom an heir, the future Louis XIII, but the official coronation ceremony, the one that would truly cement her status, had always been postponed. Henry, her rather roguish and pragmatic husband, had always found an excuse. Perhaps it was the cost, or perhaps he just didn't see the point. But Marie was insistent. This ceremony was more than just a fancy party, it was a political statement, a guarantee of her position and power within the complex and often treacherous French court. By the spring of 1610, Marie finally got her wish. Henry was about to march off to war, planning a major campaign against the Habsburgs. What would happen if he didn't return? Who would rule in his stead? The coronation was now a matter of state security. It would officially anoint Marie as queen, giving her the legal authority to act as regent for their young son, Louis, should the worst happen. So, preparations began for a magnificent spectacle at the Basilica of Saint-Denis, the traditional resting place of French monarchs. For Marie, this was everything she had ever wanted. It was her moment to finally step out of her husband's shadow and be recognized as a true sovereign power in her own right. Little did she know, this moment of triumph was poised on the brink of an unimaginable tragedy. The air in Paris was thick with anticipation. This wasn't just any royal event, it was the culmination of a decade of waiting, a public display of the Queen's legitimacy. The streets were being decorated and the finest silks and jewels were being prepared. Marie herself was overseeing every detail, ensuring that her coronation would be an event remembered for its splendor. She wanted to dazzle the French people and the court, to prove that this Italian woman was every bit the queen they deserved. It was a power play, dressed up in velvet and ermine. She was not just a wife or a mother, she was a political force. And this ceremony was her grand entrance onto the stage of French history, a stage she intended to command. But beneath all the glamour and excitement, there was a current of unease. Henry IV had many enemies, both at home and abroad. His planned war was controversial, and his own past as a Protestant, who had converted to Catholicism, still left some with lingering suspicions. The king himself seemed to have a premonition of his own, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't quite shake. The coronation, intended to secure the future of the monarchy, was taking place under a dark cloud of political tension and personal anxiety. For Marie, this was supposed to be the beginning of her real life as queen. Instead, it would become the dramatic and bloody prologue to her long and difficult reign as Queen Regent of France. The day of the coronation, the 13th of May, 1610, was a spectacle of almost overwhelming opulence. The Basilica of Saint-Denis, that ancient and hallowed church just outside Paris, was transformed. It was draped in rich tapestries and shimmering silks, every surface polished and gleaming under the light of thousands of candles. The highest-ranking nobles of France, the princes of the blood, and powerful church officials gathered, all dressed in their most extravagant finery. This was the theatre of monarchy at its most impressive, designed to inspire awe and reverence in all who witnessed it. At the center of it all was Marie de' Medici, dressed in a breathtaking gown of silver and gold, adorned with so many jewels that she seemed to glitter with every small movement. As she walked down the long aisle of the basilica, the weight of the moment and of her heavy robes must have been immense. The ceremony was ancient and deeply symbolic. The Cardinal de Joyeuse had the honor of anointing her with holy oil, a sacred ritual that was believed to bestow divine grace upon the monarch. He then placed the magnificent crown of France upon her head. At that very instant, the church erupted, trumpets blared, and the assembled crowd cried out, "Vive la Reine! Long live the Queen!" It was a sound that echoed through the stone vaults of the cathedral, a powerful affirmation of her new status. For Marie, this must have been a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, the glorious climax of her long and patient wait. The ceremony itself was a long and elaborate affair, lasting for several hours. It was a piece of carefully choreographed political theatre, every gesture and every word loaded with meaning. Marie was presented with the symbols of royal power, the sceptre, representing justice, and the hand of justice, a uniquely French symbol of the king's judicial authority. By receiving these items, she was being formally invested with the powers of the monarchy. King Henry IV watched the proceedings from a private gallery, not wanting to upstage his wife on her special day. He reportedly wept with joy, seeing his queen finally receive the honor he knew she craved. It was a rare moment of public unity for the royal couple. After the solemn rites inside the church were completed, the celebration spilled out into the streets. A grand procession made its way back towards Paris, with the newly crowned queen at its head, now officially recognized and sanctified. The people of Paris lined the route, cheering and celebrating. Banquets and festivities were planned to last for days. This was not just Marie's victory, it was a festival for the entire kingdom, a moment to celebrate the stability and continuity of the French crown. The coronation was a resounding success, a perfect display of power, wealth, and divine approval. It seemed that nothing could possibly mar this perfect day of glory. The joy of the coronation was tragically short-lived. The very next day, the 14th of May, 1610, Paris was still in a celebratory mood. The city was preparing for Marie's official entry parade, another grand event designed to show off the new queen to her subjects. King Henry IV, however, was restless. He was troubled by strange anxieties and dark thoughts that he couldn't seem to shake. Despite warnings from his advisors to stay within the secure walls of the Louvre Palace, he decided to go out. He wanted to visit his trusted minister, the Duke of Sully, who was unwell. It was a decision that would change the course of French history forever. Henry set off in his royal carriage, a large, lumbering vehicle that was open to the air. The streets of Paris were narrow and notoriously congested. As his carriage made its way down the Rue de la Ferronnerie, it became stuck in a traffic jam caused by a couple of carts. This was the moment the assassin had been waiting for. A man named François Ravaillac, a Catholic fanatic who believed the king was a heretic, jumped onto the side of the stationary carriage. Unseen by the king's guards who were struggling to clear the street, Ravaillac lunged forward with a dagger. He stabbed the king twice with brutal and fatal efficiency. Chaos immediately erupted. The king slumped over in his seat, bleeding profusely. His attendants were in a state of shock and panic. They frantically ordered the driver to turn the carriage around and race back to the Louvre. But it was too late. By the time they arrived back at the palace, the great King Henry IV, the monarch who had ended the brutal wars of religion and brought peace to France, was dead. The news spread through the palace like a shockwave, turning the sounds of celebration into wails of grief and disbelief. The festive decorations that still adorned the city suddenly seemed like a cruel joke. For Marie de Medici, the news was utterly devastating. Just one day after achieving her life's ambition of being crowned queen, she was now a widow. The very event that was meant to secure her position in case of Henry's death on the battlefield had instead become the preface to his murder right in the heart of his own capital. The political implications were immediate and enormous. France was suddenly without its strong king and on the brink of a major war. In an instant, Marie's world had been turned upside down. Her moment of glory had been snatched away, replaced by the heavy and dangerous burden of ruling a kingdom in crisis as the regent for her 8-year-old son. In the aftermath of such a shocking and traumatic event, people naturally search for signs and portents. They look for warnings that might have predicted the disaster, and so a fantastic story began to circulate, a piece of folklore that has become famously attached to Marie de Medici's coronation. The legend speaks of a mysterious and unsettling figure who appeared during the grand ceremony at Saint-Denis. This figure was known as L'Homme Rouge, or the Little Red Man. He was said to be a small, goblin-like creature, dressed entirely in scarlet, who would appear at the Tuileries Palace as a harbinger of doom for the Bourbon dynasty. According to the more dramatic versions of the tale, this phantom was seen lurking in the shadows of the basilica during the coronation itself. Some stories claim that Marie saw him, her blood running cold as she glimpsed the sinister red figure in the crowd. Other versions say that it was Henry IV watching from his gallery, who saw the omen and was filled with a sense of dread. The appearance of the Little Red Man was said to be an unmistakable sign that a great misfortune was about to befall the royal family. His presence at the moment of Marie's greatest triumph was, in this telling, a direct warning of the assassination that would follow just hours later. This legend is wonderfully dramatic. It adds a layer of supernatural horror to an already tragic historical event. The idea of a personal demon or a family curse haunting the kings of France is incredibly compelling. The Little Red Man became a recurring character in French folklore, a spectral messenger of death and disaster. His story was told and retold, growing more elaborate with each telling. He was linked not only to Henry IV's death, but also to later tragedies that befell the monarchy, including the French Revolution and the execution of Louis XVI. He became a symbol of the monarchy's inevitable doom, a ghostly reminder that even the most powerful rulers are subject to fate. But here is the crucial point for us as historians. Is this story true? Did anyone at the time actually report seeing a small, red-clad phantom at the coronation? The story is thrilling, and it makes for a wonderful tale to tell on a dark night. It neatly ties the glorious coronation to the brutal assassination with a thread of supernatural destiny. It suggests that the tragedy was foretold, written in the stars, or at least in the movements of the spirit world. However, when we turn from the world of folklore to the dry, factual world of historical documents, we find a very different picture. The legend of the Little Red Man is a brilliant ghost story, but it may just be that, a story. When we dig into the contemporary accounts of the days leading up to the assassination, we find plenty of omens, but they are of a much more human and believable kind. There is no mention whatsoever of a Little Red Man or any other phantom appearing at the coronation in the letters, diaries, or official records from 1610. The court chroniclers, who were meticulous in recording the details of the day, are completely silent on the matter. If such a strange and terrifying apparition had been witnessed by the king or queen, it seems almost certain that someone would have written it down. The absence of any contemporary evidence is very telling. What the historical sources do tell us, however, is that both Marie and Henry were filled with a sense of anxiety and foreboding. Marie de Medici was plagued by terrible nightmares in the week before the coronation. She dreamed that the jewels in her crown turned into pearls, which were a symbol of tears. She also dreamed of the king being stabbed. These dreams disturbed her so much that she begged Henry not to go out into the city on the day of his death. She had a powerful premonition, a gut feeling that something awful was about to happen. This wasn't a supernatural vision, but rather the understandable anxiety of a queen whose husband was a constant target for assassins. Henry IV himself was also uncharacteristically gloomy. His advisors noted his dark mood. He told them that he had a feeling his life would soon be cut short. Again, this doesn't require a supernatural explanation. Henry was a military man who had survived countless battles and assassination attempts. He was acutely aware of the dangers he faced. He knew his planned war was unpopular with some factions, and he knew that religious fanatics still viewed him as a traitor to the Catholic faith. His sense of impending doom was likely a soldier's intuition, a realistic assessment of the very real threats that surrounded him. His premonition was tragically accurate, but it was born of experience, not of seeing a ghost. So, the real omens were not phantoms or goblins, but the natural and powerful emotions of fear and anxiety. People also pointed to other signs after the fact. An unusually large hawthorn tree, a symbol of the royal house, had collapsed in the courtyard of the Louvre. A comet had been seen in the sky. These were natural events that were later interpreted as portents of the tragedy. This is a very common human tendency. In the wake of a disaster, we look back and find patterns and warnings in everyday occurrences. The nightmares and the king's own dark mood were real, but the story of the Little Red Man was something else entirely, a legend that would be born later. The story of the Little Red Man, while not historically accurate for Marie's coronation, actually fits into a long and fascinating tradition of royal ghost stories. Monarchs, it seems, have always been particularly prone to being haunted, at least in the popular imagination. Almost every great dynasty has its own spectral harbinger of doom, its own family ghost that appears when disaster is near. These stories serve a purpose. They add a sense of epic, almost mythic weight to the lives and deaths of kings and queens. They suggest that the fate of a ruler is so important that the spirit world itself takes an active interest in their affairs. Think of the famous ghosts of the Tower of London. The most notable, of course, are the two little princes, Edward V and his brother Richard, supposedly murdered in the Tower in 1483. Their ghostly apparitions are said to wander the fortress, a perpetual reminder of a dark chapter in royal history. Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII's second wife, is another famous royal ghost. She is said to haunt both the Tower, where she was executed, and her childhood home of Blickling Hall, carrying her severed head under her arm. These stories attach a powerful sense of tragedy and injustice to these historical figures, keeping their memory alive in a particularly vivid way. In Russia, the Tsars had their own collection of grim legends and omens. The story of Catherine the Great seeing her own double, or doppelganger, is particularly chilling. Shortly before her death, the legend goes, Catherine was told by her servants that they had seen her walking towards the throne room. Since Catherine was in her bedchamber, she went to investigate and was horrified to see her exact double sitting on the throne. She ordered her guards to shoot at the apparition, but it vanished. Soon after, she suffered the stroke that would lead to her death. This story, like the one about the Little Red Man, serves as a supernatural prelude to a real historical event. These tales of royal phantoms are more than just spooky stories. They reflect a popular belief that the lives of monarchs operate on a different plane from those of ordinary people. Their births are marked by stars, and their deaths are announced by ghosts. The legend of the Little Red Man appearing to Henry IV or Marie de Medici is a classic example of this. It elevates a grubby and brutal assassination into something more profound, a fated event, a cosmic tragedy foretold by a supernatural messenger. It transforms a simple act of political violence into a moment of high Gothic drama, which is often far more satisfying to the imagination than the messy reality of history. This tradition of royal omens was certainly not unique to France or Russia. Across the English Channel, Queen Elizabeth I, one of history's most formidable monarchs, was also associated with a chilling supernatural tale. Much like the story of Catherine the Great, Elizabeth's legend also involves a doppelganger. It is said that late in her life, as she lay on her deathbed in 1603, the Queen saw a vision of her own body. She reportedly saw herself lying on the bed, looking wan and thin, a spectral image of her own decaying form. This vision was taken by her and her attendants as a sure sign that her long and glorious reign was finally coming to an end. This story is fascinating because it mirrors the doppelganger motif seen in Catherine the Great's legend. The appearance of one's own double has been a powerful omen of death across many cultures for centuries. For a monarch whose body is both a personal vessel and a symbol of the state, the body politic, seeing such a double would have been doubly terrifying. It would signify not just personal death, but the end of an era and a potential crisis for the kingdom. For Elizabeth, who had no children and whose succession was a source of great national anxiety, this vision would have been laden with immense political weight. Just like the story of the Little Red Man, however, the historical evidence for Elizabeth's doppelganger is very thin. The tale does not appear in the most immediate, first-hand accounts of her death. It seems to have emerged a little later, as people began to mythologize the end of the great Elizabethan era. It's a story that encapsulates the melancholy and uncertainty of the time. The Virgin Queen, who had seemed almost immortal for so long, was finally succumbing to old age, and the nation was holding its breath to see what would come next. The ghost story provides a suitably dramatic and supernatural closing scene for her epic life story. Comparing these tales, Marie de Medici's Red Phantom, Catherine the Great's enthroned double, and Elizabeth I's spectral self, reveals a common pattern. In each case, a supernatural event is retroactively attached to a moment of major historical transition, the death of a monarch or a change in power. These stories are not reliable historical facts. Instead, they are a form of folk history, a way for people to process and make sense of monumental events. They provide a narrative that feels more satisfying and meaningful than a simple medical report or a straightforward account of an assassination. They transform history into legend, which is often more powerful and enduring. So, if the Little Red Man didn't really appear at Marie de Medici's coronation, where did the story come from? The answer lies in the human need to create myths, especially during times of great crisis and uncertainty. The assassination of Henry IV was a national trauma. He was a popular king who had brought stability to France after decades of civil war. His sudden and violent death plunged the kingdom into a state of shock and fear. In such moments, people are not looking for simple explanations. They are looking for meaning. A story about a supernatural omen provides a sense of order, suggesting that this terrible event was not random, but was part of a larger cosmic plan. The legend of the Little Red Man was not recorded in 1610, but it began to appear in written sources later in the 17th century. It likely began as a rumor or a folk tale, whispered in the taverns and marketplaces of Paris. People, trying to make sense of the tragedy, would have remembered Marie's nightmares and Henry's gloomy mood. They would have recalled the collapsed tree in the palace courtyard. Over time, these separate threads of anxiety and coincidence were likely woven together into a single dramatic narrative. The vague sense of foreboding was given a face and a name. The Little Red Man, a pre-existing figure from French folklore, who was the perfect candidate for the role of royal doomsayer. This process of myth-making is a powerful way for a society to deal with its collective fears. The assassination created a power vacuum and raised the terrifying prospect of renewed civil war. The story of the omen served to frame the event within a familiar narrative of fate and destiny. It was a way of saying, this was meant to be. This can be more comforting than the alternative, the idea that history is chaotic and that even a great king can be struck down by a lone fanatic in a random traffic jam. The myth imposes a supernatural order on the terrifying randomness of life and death. Furthermore, these legends often serve a political purpose. In the years that followed, as Marie de Medici's regency became increasingly unpopular, the story of the omen could be used to cast a shadow over her rule. It could be interpreted as a sign that her power was born from tragedy and was therefore ill-fated or illegitimate. Myths are flexible. They can be shaped and reshaped to fit the political needs of the moment. The Little Red Man was not just a ghost, he became a political symbol, a character in the ongoing drama of French court politics, used to express popular anxieties about the state of the kingdom long after Henry's death. In the end, the story of the Little Red Man at Marie de Medici's coronation tells us more about human psychology than it does about the events of 1610. It is a perfect example of how folklore and history become intertwined. History gives us the facts, the date of the coronation, the details of the assassination, the political fallout. But folklore gives us the story, the narrative, that helps us to feel and understand the emotional impact of those facts. We love a good omen because it adds a touch of magic and mystery to the past. It suggests that there are hidden forces at work, that the world is more enchanted and more meaningful than it sometimes appears. These legends persist because they are better stories than the unadorned truth. The image of a queen seeing a red phantom at her moment of ultimate triumph is far more memorable than an account of her feeling vaguely anxious. It sticks in the mind and is passed down from generation to generation. As historians, our job is to carefully separate fact from fiction, to peel back the layers of legend to find the historical core. But we should also appreciate the legends themselves. They are a valuable source in their own right, revealing the hopes, fears, and beliefs of the people who told them. They are the ghosts in the machine of history. The tale of Marie de Medici's coronation and the phantom omen is a powerful reminder that history is not just a collection of dates and events. It is a living story, constantly being retold and reinterpreted. The coronation was a real event, a moment of immense political significance designed to secure a dynasty. The assassination was a real tragedy, a brutal act of violence that changed the course of a nation. The little red man, however, belongs to a different realm. He is a product of the collective imagination, a ghost created to haunt a moment of national trauma. He is a work of fiction, but he tells a profound truth about our need for stories. So, when we look back at that fateful day in May 1610, we see two stories. One is the historical account of a queen's coronation followed by a king's murder. The other is a ghost story, a legend of a phantom harbinger of doom. The first story tells us what happened, the second story tells us how it felt. And perhaps, to truly understand the past, we need to listen to both. We need the facts, but we also need to understand the myths that grow around them, because in those myths we find the enduring emotional heart of the human experience, a desire to find meaning even in the darkest of times.